Welcome to Africa Unveiled. Ayinla, the legendary tales. Have you watched episode 1? Here is the final episode. In 1860, the woman who had built an empire without a husband, who had stood shoulder to shoulder with generals, who had commanded caravan across empire, Ẹfúnṣetán, faced the loss no crown could prevent. Her only child, a daughter, died during childbirth. In a world where lineage was identity and where even her power couldn't protect her own womb, this tragedy was more than personal. It was existential. Oral historians say from that day, something inside her changed. The fire that once danced in her eyes dimmed into a cold. She didn't weep publicly. She didn't mourn with loud lament. Instead, she buried the girl, and with her, buried her last emotional thoughts to the world. Ibadan didn't know it then.
Thanks for watching. Kindly smash the subscribe button. Also, like and on the notification button for latest update. Thanks.
But it has just lost the softness part of its most powerful woman. After her daughter's death, Ẹfúnṣetán enacted a brutal policy. No female slave in her household was permitted to become pregnant. Any sign of disobedience was met with death by execution. At first, people whispered, surely the rumor were false. But soon, bodies began to vanish from her compound. Oral traditions speak of 41 female slaves executed under this decree. Why such cruelty? Some say it was a trauma. She did not bear to see others carry life when her own womb had turned to dust. Others say it was fear that pregnant slave would divide loyalty and weaken the productivity of her empire. But whether it was grief, power, or madness, the law became a shadow that clung to her legacy. What began as a woman's personal mourning turned into a system of terror. The palace that once bustled with economic vigor now echoed with fear. Grief is a strange beast. It either breaks you or hardens you. For Ẹfúnṣetán, it forged an iron wall around her soul. She became distant, severe, and ruthless. And once vibrant interaction with markets, artisans, and allies became rare, she rarely smiled. She questioned every moment. Loyalty was not rewarded with affection, only demand for perfection. Even her closest aides noticed she no longer trusted anyone fully, not even her adopted son, Kúmúyìlọ. Her grief had calcified into paranoia. What the outside world saw as tyranny may have been a woman shielding herself from ever feeling again. Some say she turned from human to symbol, from mother to monarch, and from leader to legend. But the transformation was not a rise. It was a retreat behind a wall of silence. The tragedy did not just transform Ẹfúnṣetán, it transformed her empire. Workers began to fear speaking aloud in her presence. Her compound, once filled with laughter of slaves and sound of trade, became a fortress of command and control. Her policy became stricter, her punishment more public. It was no longer enough to obey, one half to prove fear. Yet through it all, she remained respected. No one could deny her genius, her reach, or her resilience. But the wrath had left. As the year wore on, her isolation grew. She walked alone in her compound. She sat in meeting like a ghost among kings. The woman who had once built an empire through trade and intellect now ruled through silence, loss, and legend. An Ibadan watch, unsure whether it stood beneath a goddess or a storm. Discipline was her god. She believed that loyalty must be earned through fear and order, not comfort. Servants who misstepped faced public flogging. Rumor say she often watched with cold silence as punishments were delivered. To outsiders this was shocking, but to her it was necessary governance. In her eyes, a single soft decision could crack the structure she had built. And so she ruled with steady hand and a hard heart. And then there were the execution. Oral tradition recount up to 41 slaves, mostly women, put to death under the authority, most allegedly violated the no pregnancy law she had imposed after her daughter's death.
Thanks for watching. Kindly smash the subscribe button. Also, like and on the notification button for latest update. Thanks.
But other offenses include disobedience, theft, or gossip. No one knows for certain how many lives were lost. Some says the number were exaggerated by enemies to stain her legacy. Others says the real number were higher, buried in silence. But what we do know is that fear became the pulse of her palace. Some called her a queen, others called her a monster. Yet no one could deny she had absolute control. Even Latosha, the warlord of Ibadan, could not command such internal order in his own domain. Was this discipline or the tyranny of a woman who has lost all? History is not a courtroom, it is a mirror. When we look at Ẹfúnṣetán Aníwúrà, what do we see? A woman who refused to be ruled and so became a ruler in a world of men? Or a leader shaped by grief who turned a personal wound into public policy? Or a tyrant drunk of power who lost her humanity for the sake of order? Hmm. Because when a woman holds the same whip a man does, why does the world recoil more? When she built an empire through blood and sweat, why is she remembered in a shadow instead of stone? The iron fist ruled, but the echo of those she punished still ripples through the telling of her name. By the early 1870s, Ibadan stood like a colossal young militant, wealthy. At its center were two giants, Ààrẹ Ọ̀nà Kakanfò Latosha, the supreme military commander of the empire, and Ẹfúnṣetán Aníwúrà, the economic queen and political powerhouse. For a time there was a balance. Latosha ruled. Latosha controlled soldiers, Ẹfúnṣetán controlled supplies. In one word, she funded them, but tension grew like thundercloud. Ẹfúnṣetán refused to submit to Latosha's ego. She would not bow in council, nor entertain his expansionist ambition. Latosha used to obedience, saw her not as a colleague but as a threat. She represented a different kind of power, a woman power, one you could not intimidate or command. And so Ibadan became a city split between sword and strategy, between might and mind. Latosha's frustration turned to strategy. He accused Ẹfúnṣetán of opposing military campaign, of creating instability within the council. Fines were levied against her, symbolic public shaming. She paid them, but with the cold pride of a woman who knew her worth. The market still bowed to her. Foreign traders still sought her approval, and even in disgrace, Her palace gate remained guarded by loyal men and women, but the crack deepened. Secret meetings were held, old grudges resurfaced. Latosha camp whispered that no woman should wield such fear, that she had gone too far, that her heart had become too dark, whether out of real concern or pure jealousy. A decision was made. Ẹfúnṣetán Aníwúrà must fall, not in battle, but from within. On June 30, 1874, the blade fell, but not from her enemy's hand. It came from within her own house. Kúmúyìlọ, her adopted son and heir, once loved like blood, was bribed and manipulated into betrayal. Oral history say that Latosha offered him political protection and maybe even power. That night, under the veil of silence, two slaves entered her quarters and strangled her in her sleep, following Kúmúyìlọ's order. No war, no trial, no final speech, just silence. The Iyalode of Ibadan, voice of women, queen of trade, iron ruler, was dead. By morning, the city awoke to shock and silence. Some rejoiced, others wept. Many simply feared what could come next, because when you remove the strongest voice in the room, the echo never leaves. Her death did not end the story, it ignited it. When news reached Egba leaders, her original king, outrage followed. Demand for justice echoed across town. Kúmúyìlọ was stripped of his title, and the slave who killed her were executed. But it was too late. Ẹfúnṣetán was gone, and with her went a type of power that Ibadan would never see again. A power born not of lineage or war, but will, intellect, and enterprise. Was her assassination a necessary removal of tyranny, or the silencing of a woman who rose too high in a man's world? We do not know if she fought in that final moment. All we knew is that Ibadan turned on its Iron Woman, and in doing so sealed a legacy that will burn for generations. Ẹfúnṣetán Aníwúrà was gone, but her silence made more noise than her presence ever did. Ibadan market continued. A void opened in the space where a woman once stood like a stone, unmoving, unbowed. The silence left behind was heavy. Some felt relieved, others disturbed. For decades, her name was spoken in hushed tone, not forgotten, but feared. The very system that she helped build tried to erase her. Ashamed of her method, yet unable to deny her impact. Ibadan had never seen a woman rise so high, and it hasn't again. But while time marched on, so did her legend, like a smoldering ember buried in ash. Her memory refused to die. In the 20th century, Ẹfúnṣetán returned, not in flesh, but in literature, in the classroom, and on stage. Professor Akinwunmi Ṣọlá iconic play Ẹfúnṣetán Aníwúrà reawoken her story. Artists portray her as fierce, proud, tragic, and powerful. Statues rose in Ibadan. Schools were named after her. Women invoke her name not just in fear, but in strength. And yet, debate never ceased. Was she a role model or a warning? A visionary or a villain? For every teacher who praised her tenacity, there is another who criticized her cruelty. In the archive, she is both celebrated and condemned, a ghost history cannot settle. What makes Ẹfúnṣetán unforgettable is not just what she did, it's what she represented. She defied every expectation of womanhood in her time. She rose without a husband, she ruled without a crown, she enforced without apology. She showed that a woman's mind could be as sharp as a king's sword, and sometimes more dangerous. In a society where softness was expected of women, she chose steel. Where silence was a virtue, she raised her voice, and for that she was both feared and revered. A fire burned too hot for her era and perhaps for hers, but it is a fire that will light the way for those brave enough to ask, what does true power look like when won by a woman? And so we close the story of Ẹfúnṣetán Aníwúrà, not with judgment, but with a mirror. She was not perfect, she was not gentle, but she was real and she was powerful. Her life challenged us to rethink leadership, gender, grief, and ambition. Her legacy stands at the crossroad, part status, part shadow. Was she a monster created by pain or a genius punished for greatness? Only you can decide. But remember this, in a world designed to forget powerful women, Ẹfúnṣetán did something few Ẹfúnṣetán did something few could. She made history bow to her name.
Thanks for watching. Kindly smash the subscribe button. Also, like and on the notification button for latest update. Thanks.